As we move through life, the questions we ask ourselves start changing. In our 20s and 30s, most of our energy goes into building careers, income, homes, families. Life is busy, forward moving, and there isn't much time to pause. But somewhere in our 40s and 50s, the pace shifts slightly. The questions become quieter, but also more meaningful. We start thinking less about speed and more about stability, less about accumulation and more about order. We realize that peace of mind doesn't always come from doing more. Often it comes from having fewer loose ends. And it's usually in this phase of life that certain topics begin to sit at the edge of our thoughts. Not urgently, not dramatically, just persistently. Topics we know are important, but don't always know how or when to approach. Welcome back to another episode of What If You Live to Be 100. This is a space where we talk about living longer, yes, but more importantly, living with clarity, dignity, and intention through the second half of life. In today's episode, I want to talk about one such topic. It's something almost every family is aware of, but very few families actually address properly. It's not exciting and it's not comfortable, but it quietly affects the people we care about the most: the will. Over time, what I've come to realize is that most financial stress in families doesn't come from lack of money or poor planning. It comes from things that were left unclear, postponed, or never written down because they felt awkward to deal with. And the will sits right at the center of that discomfort in Indian households. We don't avoid it out of neglect. We avoid it because it feels final. It feels like talking about something we'd rather not imagine. So we tell ourselves we're healthy, the family is simple, everything is in place, and we'll get to it when the time feels right. What usually happens instead is that families encounter this gap not during a calm conversation, but during moments when emotions are already stretched thin, during a medical emergency, after a sudden loss, or in the weeks that follow, when practical questions begin to surface quietly. And these questions are not emotional ones, they're very practical. What happens to this account? Who decides what happens to this property? Is this really how he or she would have wanted things to be handled? In most Indian homes, there is a strong belief that nominations are enough. We fill them once, often many years ago, and assume the job is done. There's comfort in believing that if a spouse or child is nominated, things will automatically fall in place. But nominations in reality are administrative tools. They help institutions release money at the most, but they don't communicate intent and they don't replace a will. What makes this more complicated is that nominations are rarely revisited. Life moves on, marriages, children, aging parents, changing responsibilities, but paperwork remains frozen in time. And because nothing appears to be broken on the surface, there's no urgency to fix it. There is also the very familiar habit of postponement. I'll do it later. Later, when life slows down. Later, when things feel more settled. Later, when it seems necessary. But life doesn't wait for our sense of readiness, and clarity is often needed when we least expect it. When families go through a crisis without a will, what they experience is not usually conflict, it's delay, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Documents need to be traced, processes take time, decisions are made without certainty. And all of this happens when the family is least equipped to deal with complexity. Spouses often find themselves handling financial matters they were never deeply involved in, not because they weren't capable, but because there was never a reasons to step in earlier. Children want to do the right thing, but without written clarity, They are forced to make assumptions, and assumptions always leave room for doubt. This is why I believe we need to change how we look at the will altogether. A will is not a document about death, it's a document about continuity. It's a way of saying, I've thought this through and I don't want the people I care about to carry uncertainty along with their grief. From a practical point of view, this doesn't need to be complicated. A will can begin in simple language. What matters is clarity. Who should receive what, who should take responsibility, and how decisions should be handled if you're not around to explain them. It's also important to look at nominations alongside the will, not in isolation. Make sure they reflect your current reality, not a version of your life from many years ago. And ensure that at least one trusted person knows that this document exists and where it's kept. A will that no one can find doesn't help anyone. These are not overwhelming tasks. They don't require months of effort. They require intention, a few focused hours, and the willingness to address an uncomfortable topic calmly rather than leaving it for a stressful moment. In this channel, we often talk about living longer. But living longer isn't just about adding years to life. It's also about reducing uncertainty for ourselves and for the people who walk alongside us. Clarity has a quiet power. It doesn't announce itself, but when it's missing, its absence is felt very deeply. A will is not something you create in fear. It's something you create in calm. When life is steady, when you can think clearly, when decisions are made out of care, not pressure. If this is something you've been postponing, maybe don't think of it as paperwork. Think of it as completing a conversation, one that doesn't need to be rushed, but does deserve to be completed. And if you already have a will, perhaps this is a reminder to revisit it, to see if it still reflects your life today, not the life you were living many years ago. Because legacy is not just what we leave behind financially. Legacy is the emotional experience our family goes through when we're not around to explain things ourselves. And the more clarity we leave behind, the gentler that experience becomes. In this What If You Live to Be 100 series, we'll continue to talk about these quiet but important parts of life: money, health, relationships, purpose, not from a place of fear, but from a place of awareness and preparation. If these conversations resonate with you, stay with us. There's much more to explore as we think about what it really means to live fully, consciously, and with intention, especially if we are fortunate enough to live a long life. Thanks for being with me till the end of this episode. I'll see you in the next one.